Hi there everyone, this is Judge Schlackman. In this video I'll be speaking about some psychological and metaphysical phenomena, focusing on the idea of what happens when we're fighting against something or someone. So if we think about this idea of fighting something, we often see that verbiage or terminology used in the society around us. So people talk about fighting against crime, fighting against poverty, fighting against diseases, fighting against racism, and so on. So there are many areas of life where we may perceive something that we don't like, something that we see as a problem, and we focus on that problem. Our focus of energy and attention is directed toward it, and we feel we need to do something to counteract whatever that particular problem or undesirable phenomena or thing is. So we can look at some examples of this and start to recognize the challenge that comes about, that if we're not careful about our consciousness, our thoughts and emotions, and our consequent actions, we may either unintentionally or inadvertently be helping perpetuate the very things that we believe or think that we are fighting against. Sometimes this is set up to occur in a sort of intentional way, where there are people who are in some way profiting from or benefiting from this perceived problem or phenomena, and they're actually manipulating or deceiving people to unconsciously or unintentionally allow for the perpetuation of the phenomena. First, we'll look at the case of fighting against war. Looking back at the history of the last century, the First World War was viewed as the war to end all wars. So prior to that time, there had been a variety of small wars between countries, regional wars, and then you had this war that involved many different countries, and there were people who sort of hoped or believed that by fighting and winning that war, it would resolve the conflicts and disputes that tended to lead to wars, and it would therefore be the war to end all wars. It would lead to some sort of utopian, peaceful world. Of course, that's not what happened. That war led to a lot of death and destruction, and it led to lots of ongoing problems and resentments that bubbled up again in the Second World War, which was even more deadly and destructive than the First World War. So if you don't like war, if you don't like violence, you're not going to end it by fighting against it, by using violence to end violence. You're really just playing into the same paradigm that you're seeking to go beyond or transcend. So you would need to provide some alternative. So rather than fighting against war, you would need to provide some alternative way of resolving conflict, of helping human societies or countries work together for a common good or cooperate to resolve their differences or find compromises, ways to coexist or live peacefully on the planet. So if you're against war, you don't want to go into a state of aggression or hostility or violence in your effort to stop or fight against war. You want to create an energy that's more peaceful and harmonious, you want to present or project that into the world so that that alternative frequency will start to build up and override the frequency, the energy that had been creating war. So you don't change a paradigm by operating really within that paradigm. You bring about its dissolution or its conclusion by creating and presenting a better alternative that starts to become more attractive and more desirable. We can look at things like diseases in this way as well. In the medical mainstream model that focuses on fighting against diseases, the methods of fighting against diseases are often methods that actually create or perpetuate more disease or illness, even if it's not the same type of illness. Those interventions often create other illnesses, so-called adverse effects or side effects. So if you, let's say, have cancer and you treat your cancer with a surgery, with a radiation therapy or chemotherapy, well, all those treatments involve some form of invasive intervention or assault upon the body. And so with the stress that they present to the body, those interventions will often create other symptoms of illness or disease, and they may even in some way perpetuate the original illness or disease. So we want to be careful of how we approach even the concept of disease, rather than seeing disease as something attacking us, something external to ourself that we need to eradicate and remove. We can look at disease as merely the expression or reflection of our own state of disharmony, our own state of stress or imbalance. And if we can look at what's creating or causing that stress and imbalance within our being, whether it's things in our environment or patterns within our own consciousness or our lifestyle or diet or things like that, we can address those causes. We could remove and clear away the stresses, and then we'll naturally return to a state of health. There would be no need to fight a disease. The disease would naturally disappear on its own when we create health. So the answer to disease is not really attacking or fighting the disease. If you look at it from this perspective, it's about understanding what causes it, so you can then focus on recreating health. So that would be the paradigm to present, one of focusing on and creating health rather than fearing or fighting disease or illness. Even the current situation that's affecting our global society, the so-called COVID pandemic, is one where the public health or mainstream medical responses to people appearing ill is one where the efforts to in some way fight the disease or try to escape from exposure to the microbe that's believed to cause the disease is actually creating circumstances that foster more illness. So if you use some pharmaceutical drugs that attack the symptoms of disease without addressing the causes, then the illness may progress even further. So a cold or flu type illness can progress to become a more severe pneumonia type illness if the immune system isn't allowed to function in a balanced manner. Also, if we try to avoid contact with other people, if we isolate ourselves, then we're creating psychological circumstances that are known to be very stressful, that are known to weaken or suppress our immune system, leaving us more vulnerable to developing illnesses that are associated with microbes, as well as other types of diseases. So all this social distancing, all this mask wearing, which restricts the natural flow of air, all of that can affect our vulnerability to illness or infection. And so we may think that we're trying to avoid microbes, trying to keep a disease from being transmitted at that purely physiological level of viruses or bacteria being transmitted between individuals. But that's just one little piece of the puzzle, or one little part of the equation of what may or may not contribute to someone getting ill. So most people who are exposed to any particular microbe are not going to become ill from it. It's the other variables, the other stresses and factors that may be present that may play a much greater role in determining health and sickness. And if our effort to avoid exposure to some type of perceived pathogen creates lots of stress and disruption to our lives, if it upsets our sense of safety, security, stability, if it interferes with our personal relationships, with our ability to have a job and support our family, if it's doing all these things that are creating a lot more stress within our being, then we're actually going to be much more likely to catch some type of illness or disease, regardless of whether we were in contact with any one particular microbe. So if we look at this more holistically, if we look at the bigger picture, if we see it from that more expansive paradigm, we can see how trying to fight against or trying to stop the transmission of what we believe is the cause of a disease actually leads to more illness, to more people displaying symptoms of sickness. If we look at some other phenomena in society, we could see also more cases of how trying to fight against something, responding to something with fear or aggression, rather than presenting a more high-frequency paradigm to replace it, can merely just perpetuate what we're trying to fight against or oppose. You often see this in the political sphere, where people very much don't like some situation or some person or politician, and they are looking to vote for or support something that's fighting against whatever they oppose. And so that energy of fighting against is energy that actually brings attention toward the very thing that you're looking to remove or replace. So your energy is still in some way tied to or focused upon the very phenomena or person that you dislike. So let's say you're going to vote against a president that you don't like. Well, if you're voting for the opponent only because the opponent is the alternative to the person you don't like, your energy isn't actually supporting something positive in relation to that opponent. Your focus is more on trying to remove the person that you don't like. So you're fighting against something rather than feeling enthusiastic and excited about the person that you're supporting. So this often leads to a polarization phenomena where the person that you are working against ends up winning, this is something we can also consider in relation to people who are fighting various forms of racism and bigotry and discrimination and sexism and so on. So these social justice types of issues. Well, if you start to observe examples of racism in society, for example here, you'll perhaps get very upset about that. You're seeing it as something that's unjust, that's wrong, that needs to be removed, that needs to be changed. And that's a very reasonable, sensible way to perceive that situation. It's commendable to want to create change in that manner, to want to bring about a society where people are not going to be unfairly discriminated against, where people can be feeling safer in being who they truly are, not subjected to any type of persecution or maltreatment based upon their race, their gender, their sexual preference, whatever particular aspect of that individual might be involved. So if we want to bring about social justice, how do we do that? Do we go out and seek to demonize and attack everyone who we perceive is exhibiting some form of bigotry or discrimination? Do we try to make them feel bad about who they are? Do we condemn who they are as a person? Do we seek to create all sorts of laws and regulations and policing to enforce those in our effort to bring about change? So are we preoccupied with trying to control other people, to create thought crimes? Is this the answer? Well, if we're busy attacking other people for what we perceive as their unjust attitudes, we may actually be creating some more resistance, some more defensiveness by those people. They may feel threatened or attacked and try to cling to the very identity that we wish for them to shift or change. So people tend to become defensive and to protect themselves and whatever they perceive as their sense of safety or their comfort zone when someone is trying to denounce them, trying to invalidate them. So if you're out there trying to invalidate the people that you see as examples of hostility or persecution or aggression, you may be bringing the very energy directed toward them that you see them directing toward other people. So sometimes when you're out there trying to dispel hate, your own anger about that hate sort of feeds into the same type of energy. So fear can't drive out fear, hate can't drive out hate. Fighting against something usually isn't very effective in driving out the thing you're trying to fight against. A better approach is to present the alternative, so to provide another paradigm that is more effective in some way, that presents an alternative that then becomes more attractive for other people. They can see how it's more desirable. So if you in your own life are a positive example of being kind and respectful and accepting and fair to other people, and that produces positive results, positive ripple effects in your social environment, in your community, then that creates an energy around that that builds and becomes stronger and starts to become more attractive even to people who in the past may have held on to bigotry and prejudice. So this is another approach to helping that discrimination or bigotry start to dissipate. People see that there's a better way to live, a more desirable way to interact socially, and over time changes naturally do occur. If we look at our own society, at the country that most of us live in, and those listening may be in America where I live or in other countries, if you look at what's happened over time, societies do tend to evolve, and the progression has been generally toward more freedom and more equal rights for people. So this phenomena has occurred in many cases without any aggressive efforts to force it to happen. It naturally occurs as human beings elevate their consciousness, as they have experiences that transform their way of thinking. So if there's an example of a person who is brought up in a family where they're taught to be very prejudiced and bigoted against some particular race or ethnic group, well, the best solution to help them release and let go of that attitude is for them to have the opportunity to interact with other people and to have positive experiences with the types of individuals that they were taught to have prejudice toward. Your own life experiences are very powerful and can help you change your perspective. You don't need someone else to impose upon you or force you to change the way you think. You'll naturally go through that type of transformation or shift in your attitude when you have the ability to observe things around you, to interact with other people, to encounter new experiences and information that challenge your prior paradigm. And this tends to occur more readily when it's not being forced or imposed upon you. So when people are fighting you, they're trying to condemn you and make you be someone other than you currently are, you may be more resistant and inclined to cling to your old attitudes and prejudices. But if things are presented in a more gentle way, where you're just given the opportunity to encounter different information and experiences and come to your own realizations, then this is probably a more desirable way for this type of change to unfold, for it to happen in this kind of organic, natural manner, rather than there being some aggressive effort to force it to occur. So we've looked at these different examples of what occurs when we're trying to fight against something, how that can often unintentionally help maintain or perpetuate the old paradigm, the very thing that we're desiring to change. And I would encourage each of you to consider this phenomena, how when we fight against something, when we're bringing that type of energy toward it, we're often feeding into it or perpetuating it in an unconscious way. As you observe your own life, as you observe different social phenomena, as you observe the paradigms that are playing out in this society around us, whether it's political, religious, scientific, medical, spiritual, social, and so on. These are all things that we can look at with kind of a more balanced perspective where we can analyze, or what's the word I'm thinking of here? Evaluate, that would be a good word. We can evaluate these phenomena in a more in-depth manner rather than just repeating the patterns that we may be accustomed to. The paradigm or pattern of fighting against something is one that it would behoove us to re-examine to see what effects or what consequences it's been creating, and to perhaps consider different paradigms, different ways of approaching the phenomena that we desire to change. For those of you that are interested in holistic health and wellness and personal development and spirituality, I invite you to view my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I would like to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.